Hey folks, Quill18 here, and welcome to my preview for Europa Universalis 4. So EU4 is the upcoming new grand strategy game from Paradox Development Studios. At this time, there's no official release date announced, but it's looking like Q3 of 2013, which probably puts it around August or September. So I'm looking forward to that quite a bit, because I'm a fan of these games. And what is a grand strategy game? What is Europa Universalis? We're going to answer some of those questions in this video, and then in subsequent videos, what we're going to do is look at what the specific changes are from EU3 to EU4. So if you're a veteran of the series, you're probably curious about what's been added, what's been removed, what's been changed, and how does that actually play in-game. So these grand strategy games, these Paradox titles, they are highly historical, very deep simulations of sort of running a country in some period of time. Specifically, Europa Universalis, which is really the flagship product for Paradox, covers a period of time from about the 1400s to the 1800s, so about 400 years of history simulated one day at a time, which is utterly ridiculous to think about. The game is in real time, but it's pausable. You can slow things down, you can speed things up as much as you want, so you've got quite a lot of control there. The games do take a fair amount of time to play through, but it really depends on how much warfare you're getting into. When you're in the middle of a war and moving units around, you tend to slow down the speed quite a bit more to be able to move things around, whereas if you're playing a more diplomatic, trade, colonial type of game, often the game speed will be a little bit higher because you don't need to do as many actions sort of day to day to move your troops around. In addition to this sort of incredible depth of time and the sheer amount of government, political, diplomatic, economic, and so on and so forth choices you can make, you also get the choice of playing as pretty much any nation that existed during that time. That means you can play as the big boys. Classically, that would be someone like France or England. People with quite a lot of power and a lot of influence and the ability to really take over huge chunks of the world relatively easily. And those tend to be excellent choices as a beginner. And you can also pick some of the more medium-sized nation. Maybe you want to play as Portugal, which, militaristically maybe can't do quite as much, but you've got tons of potential for trade and colonization. And then there's the ability to take someone like a tiny one-province minor nation that modern-day people have probably never heard of. Well, maybe you want to make that into a dominant European power. And it's not just limited to Europe. Europe tends to get a lot more of the attention, but the entire world map is there. You can play as Middle Eastern nations. You can play as Indian sort of nations. I don't think India is formed, but there are various Indian sort of states that are available there. There's Chinese states, there's Japanese states, there's North American native tribes are available to be played, although you'll probably get your butt kicked once the Europeans cross the big pond. As it is. Now, the game is very historical, but it doesn't mean that you have to play it in lockstep with history. You certainly can. Europa Universalis 4 plops you down sort of at the end of the 100 Years' War, and France is still trying to evict England from the main continent. And you can go ahead and keep doing that and focus on forming a proper France, for example. But maybe you decide you have slightly different ambitions. You make peace with England, and instead you turn your attention over on the Iberian Peninsula, and you decide that Spain will never exist on your watch. We're going to turn that all French blue. These things are entirely possible. Maybe you want to take out Germany as a preemptive strike. There's a lot of flexibility in the gameplay. Obviously, there's going to be potentially some advantages to playing in a somewhat historical way, just because the reason it worked historically is because there were certain advantages, there were a sort of natural flow, but you don't have to play it that way. So tons and tons and tons of depth to the game. And when you first start playing, the sheer number of options can be a little bit overwhelming, although these things have gotten better. With the release of Crusader Kings 2 and now the efforts they've put together with EU4, it's quite obvious that their team have a dedicated tutorial person. They have made great strides towards having a much more intuitive user interface. They haven't dumbed down the game. The game is not any less complex, and yet it's more intuitive because the way they present information in EU4 compared to EU3 is just much more digestible, plus a few gameplay changes that we're going to talk about a little bit later. So that's a general overview of the game itself. And now, unfortunately, just a heads up, there's a limited potential for actual capturing a video in this game just because of how certain things with the press licensing and embargo and things are set up, so you're mostly going to see screenshots in the background. So that's that. Now let me talk about my trip that I took to Stockholm. In fact, I'm going to put a cut here. We'll put it as a separate video. That way, if you don't care about that that sort of multiplayer event with the press people, you can just skip on ahead to the next video in the series where we'll start talking about the specifics. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.